Dear Harstem, Protoss is IMBA, underbalanced. As a fellow Protoss player, I am slowly realizing why there are not many Protoss in the highest levels. As for Zerg, I think Queens are incredibly imbalanced. How is it fair that a race can easily macro up with larva injects while also surmounting an unbreakable defense? I thought that Protoss were supposed to be the most cost-efficient race due to their cost, but Zergs can spawn a few Queens and it's like they have a constant super battery and a supercharged warp gate in one. In the early game, I thought I did a decent job keeping the pesky Zerg in line with my worker snipes with the adepts, and I also thought I took decent fights, and also believed to have contained the Zerg with my army out on the map. However, despite getting more Archons and even landing beautiful storms in the choke points, my valiant warrior still fell to the Zerg. I took a look at the key fights and always saw how Queens were the game changers when it came to key fights. If there were no transfuses, I would have rolled my opponent easily. Much like what happened to the Mothership Core, I think the Zerg race needs some serious rebalancing in regard to the Queen. Your boy, Barcode. Now, this was sent in to me by a Korean servered diamond player with 3410 MMR saying that he thinks the Queen is imbalanced. So let's figure out if it really is. Now, I mentioned that this was sent in by a Barcode, but after some investigations, I figured out that this actually was sent in by the Zerg player instead of by the Protoss player. And this happens very frequently. I usually only want people to be flamed, or I want to make fun of people if they voluntarily send in those replays. In the past, I've had trouble with this where, people send it in and I was like, oh, what an idiot. And then it ended up being the opponent. Sometimes people just put it on the form itself, like, I'm sending this in for my opponent. I'm like, well, that's not really the goal of this. However, I decided to anonymize both of the player names. I turned the Protoss into this Zerg dumb, because this Zerg is extremely dumb. And I changed the Zerg's name into Huge Moron 1, 2, 3. That's because I think this Zerg player occupies spots 1, 2, and 3 in the Huge Moron competition, not because he is the 123rd moron. Either way, let's get into the episode with that little bit of housekeeping out of the way. As we see this Zerg dumb, opening with losing a probe into saying lag, which is the type of move that I always like. People that complain about lag usually are very well liked. Complaining about lag, I think, is a little bit like complaining about having a headache. It's like everyone knows that when they have it, it is very annoying and very frustrating, yet no one really cares if it isn't happening to them. You've never, at least I've never heard of this, giving someone a fruit basket because they have like a headache, or you like send your condolences because their internet sucks. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry you have lag. And then you kind of go on with your day. It's the same with headaches. It's the same type of vibes. You can complain about lag as much as you want. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of empathy, but I do like the try here by this Zerg dumb. Huge Morons going in with an Overlord Scout, which is a good start of things as well. It's going to see absolutely everything. It's an interesting wall. Double gate opener. Love to see it. Warp gate, 20 seconds in. I've discussed this ad nauseum, this type of opener, where you get a second gate before attack and why it sucks. The reason why it sucks is because this second gate realistically cannot be used. You only want to get this gateway once the research is about 54 seconds in on the warp gate, because at that point it completely matches up. You can also get it 44 seconds in and then put a chrono boost on the warp gate if you want, so you can get it slightly faster. But like this, it doesn't make any sense. You could try to get a unit out of this, but most of the time they just build a gateway and then don't do anything with it. Instead, we're seeing a fast battery as well. We're seeing no worker production. We're seeing an adept that's actually dealing some damage. I mean, it killed a drone. It's actually going to kill a second drone, which once again pretty much confirms that this Zerg is dumb and a huge moron at the same time. Gonna follow this up with Glaives. Second gate into Glaives, into robotics facility. This is gonna be a timing that's gonna be about as tight as my bond with Jesus, which is not very tight. I mean, when is this gonna hit? Robo started at what? 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And Prism still gotta be built, fly across the map. This guy's gonna hit like 5 minutes into the game. I just don't think that's going to be good enough in my mind. Also, his glaives is going to be finishing much faster, especially if he chrono boosted just a single time. He puts a chrono boost here on a Nexus that is not doing a whole lot because he's not producing anything from that Nexus. Meanwhile, on the huge moron side of things, we have 2 more gases coming down. We have 2 Evo chambers, which is also not a build order. I'd love to see some more drones being produced here. Not seeing that either. What are we at? 9 larvae. 8 roaches now being produced. Now he's preparing for, well, for something. He's preparing for that on a very low worker count, a very high Evo count, and a very high gas count as well. It only makes sense to take extra gases if you're already saturated on minerals on, I would say, at least 2.5 bases. He isn't even saturated on 2 bases right now, and he already started building a lot of structures that he currently can't use. Now, roaches are going to find these adepts, and these glaive adepts are just going to go back home. This is, quite frankly, a pretty bad push execution. It doesn't hit very tight. It doesn't hit very strong. Prism now is going to move across the map to the exact same place where the glaive adapters were earlier. This is fine if you're pushing in with 8 to 10 adepts and then you warp in 4 more with this Prism. But if you're only going with 4 and you want to add in 4 more, it's just not going to be enough. Now it's kind of like using a plane just for the driving. Because you could have reached the same location with just glaive adepts. The Prism, it has something special, just like an airplane has something special. It can take you over the ocean at a pretty high speed. But the Prism here isn't doing any of that. There's no drops heading into the main base. There's no drops, just kind of running over terrain, which regular adepts can't. No, it's just going to the same spot that the adepts could be going to, which is practically pointless. Do love the right click here on the Prism as well. It's a good move. Always want to... keep an eye on that. Do have to be careful that if more units show up, you don't just lose everything for free like this. Boom, 1-2 quick force fields, and all of this is going to be gone. I love how well this Circus Dam is setting this up. He goes in, picks up the sentry to drop it again, but no force field. This sentry wasn't even under attack. This Prism has some serious helicopter parenting skills, which I'm not a huge fan of. As a response to this, we're seeing an infestation pit, we're seeing a Hydra den, +1 range. The only thing we're missing is a carapace upgrade, a 4th base, and 2 more gases. This is to be one of the worst responses you can do against a 2 base all-in. This guy is playing for the late game. This isn't even the mid game yet. This is like inventing a chip before hitting the Stone Age. It's like, well... what do you want to do with that? Like, I don't know. Maybe if we invent computers a couple of tens of thousands of years from now, we can make something happen. It's like, no, not quite. Yeah, 2 more gases. Why not? Roach speed. Yes. Grooved spines. Good call. Sees the entire army of his opponent on his doorstep. Carapace as well. Start the hive. Where's the 4th base that I asked for? Maybe over here. Beautiful stuff. He's producing pure units, so he knows, the huge moron does know that something is happening. But for whatever reason, he's not really responding to it with, the rest of its stuff. Okay, he's gonna... half of his army is gonna get caught off guard a little bit here. Archon's gonna show up as well. This is not a great fight for the toss, though. This Immortal's very, very vulnerable. Is gonna fall. In this type of situation, I know that when people send a replay pretending to be someone else, that the toss is going to end up losing. But you always kind of hope, you know that the toss is going to... that this is the one replay where the toss actually wins. There was like a double maneuver, a double trick. Because I'm really cheering for this guy. But yeah, he just stood here for... I think he arrived here at 6 minutes and 30 seconds or so, 6 minutes and 45 seconds, then stood outside of his opponent to give his opponent enough time to respond with a lot of units, because the huge moron wasn't ready whatsoever yet. Like 6-7 roaches, which all should have died against the force fields, and then there was nothing there. He had freaking double evos. He's getting an infestation pit and Hydra then. Like, that's a lot of resources being sunk in stuff that doesn't do anything. Now we're gonna go for another attack. Meanwhile, this Zerg Dam is going to... actually get an okay trade, but not good enough given the economical situation. It's 41 workers to 56. Yes, there's a 3rd base behind this, but there's no workers really to saturate it. So Actually, this... It's almost is getting close. Maybe with a good force field? Look at that. Puff! Ooh! There we go, baby. That's actually quite nice. Queens are gonna probably hold this, and reinforcements coming in at the third and from the natural should be enough here. This was much closer than it ever should have been, though. We're gonna double expand while under heavy pressure. Kind of understandable because there's just not enough larva available right now due to the very poor injecting of this huge moron. Storm start, which I like. I think Storm is generally good. This also would have been really cool if this Zerg Dam would have just continued building probes the entire way through. Like, if you just kind of stand here and you're getting like better upgrades, you're going into Storm, you're building probes, you're actually in a fine spot because this huge moron didn't scout anything. Like, he didn't realize that there's a third behind this. I mean, the moron, for all he knows, there could be 4 bases behind all of this. Like, he just has absolutely no clue. He's going to build 13 drones, 0 scouting whatsoever by this moron. As this Zerg Dam is just not really crafting a great army in my mind. We still haven't seen any pressure on the sides either, you know, like a drop in the main base, an attack over on a potential base, or even just a run by into this third with like 2 zealots coming from the right side. Could have been pretty big, could have pulled the huge moron out of position. So now we're going to get a couple of spines. Brilliant move as well if you have no clue what your opponent has, economically speaking. Like, it could be 6 bases. There could be carriers on the way for all the moron knows. This moron has absolutely no clue. It's going to get 2-2 upgrades. Gets a lurker then as well. Prism is going to go into the main. Please warp in before you go into the main. This is one of my many pet peeves that I have. Whenever you go into a base, please have some zealots in there already. Like, if this was being scouted, you're just giving your opponent more time to respond. In this case, it's fine because the moron has no concepts of map vision whatsoever. But still, it is good practice overall, you know? Even if it isn't always necessary, in this case, it is just good to do. And it's going to move the Prism now straight to where he wants to attack. I did really love this attack, but I would have loved more if the Prism would have stayed on the left, because the moron sent his entire army to walk after a 2-supply unit. So that actually could have had some, you know, some serious implications for the defense here on the moron side of things. Couple of Stormers now. If we can hit this, that would be big too. Come on, hit it. It's mainly going to hit his own Zealots. A little bit of the Queens as well. Observer is helping out. Lots of Hydras, not great against Storm. Big warp in of Zealots. Boom, send 6 over here, 4 over here. Bang, bang, bang. Meanwhile, you storm this army. You actually have a decent chance of, okay, maybe not winning, but at least dealing a lot of damage. But yeah, right now, I'm afraid that despite his idiocy, the moron is gonna hold. 2-2 is about to finish up. Lurkers finish up. I do believe we have Hive at this point as well. Tried your best, little buddy. You tried your best. That's actually pure sadness. GG gets called, and yeah. The moron, sadly, is gonna win. And there's really not much you can do about that. Now, the claim of Queens being too strong here is obviously ridiculous. Queens didn't even really do that much. The build order of the toss just wasn't very good. But I'm not even gonna go into all of that, because despite the Protoss player not playing very well, he didn't necessarily suck. At least not as a human being. You know, he complained a little bit about the lag. Pretty sure he even left with a GG. Didn't leave with a GG, but that happens to the best, you know. I can forgive him that. If you have a little bit of lag, it's frustrating. If you have a headache, you're not going to be the nicest person either. So I can forgive him that, you know. What I can't forgive is pretending to be someone else, sending in a replay to me, trying to trick good old Harstem here, making content for you all. And then when he steps in the trap, going, I got the good old Harstem again. That is not cool. That doesn't just suck. That super sucks. And it's even a little bit imbalanced. It is some type of imbalance in your head, perhaps. Because that is not okay, my dear friend. So you, huge moron number 1, 2, and 3, you suck. And that's just the way it is. For the Protoss player, keep fighting the good fight. I truly do believe in you. Fix those things that I mentioned, and we'll be seeing you in the Masters League in no time. All right. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this episode of Does This Guy Suck? Yes, he does. If you did enjoy it, smash like, hit like, press the thumbs up, and be sure to like the video. Bye-bye.